Steve Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, proving all things comes to those who wait. First of all, this has been very enlightening. Mr. Zucker, I'd seen you on television, particularly with the Conan Lennon World, which is not your favorite moment. But now I know who Bob Costas has been doing an impression of all these years. Sound a lot like Bob Costas, or he sounds a lot like you. Mr. Harper started his remarks talking about Mr. Roberts and his father's company starting in Tupelo, Mississippi. And I found it interesting to hear that the reason you started is because the folks there couldn't get their antennas to pick up Memphis. I don't think that's why Elvis and his family left Tupelo and went to Memphis, but there's lots of reasons to do it, and I want y'all always to remember that Memphis is responsible for everything. Elvis and Memphis. Before there was Elvis, there was nothing. That's what John Lennon said. Before there was Memphis, there wasn't any Comcast. Remember that. I concur with some of the remarks made by my colleagues Sheila Jackson Lee and Maxine Waters about diversity and minority representation on the station. But if I'm correct, Mr. Zucker, does not Harold Ford Jr., who's the Tennessee 9 and my predecessor in this position, appear quite frequently on NBC?
He does, quite frequently.
And is that kind of unique among the networks for an African American to be that frequent on the networks?
Well, I think that we're actually quite proud of our the diversity that we have on our news and cable news programs, and I think Mr. Ford is the latest example of that, and I think we've done quite a good job there.
It's a good. The district brings those type of people forward. Was Al Roker one of the first African American weather people on the networks?
Yes.
Or the first?
If he wasn't the first, he was the first with such a prominent role as he's played on the Today Show. I think our history of diversity in our news programs has been quite strong. My first job at NBC was actually as the writer-researcher for Bob Costas, and I think that's where I may have picked this up. But after that, my next job was at the Today Show, where Bryant Gumbel played a huge role in turning the Today Show into the most watched morning show in America, then was joined by Al Roker not there long after. And today, Mr. Roker continues to play a huge role. Lester Holt is the anchor of Weekend Nightly News on NBC News. As you pointed out, Mr. Ford plays a prominent role on analysis on our news programs. So we're quite proud of the job that we've done with regard to that.
And I was going to bring up Brian Gumpel. Appreciate your mentioning, but I was really in another vein with Al Roker. My next movement was to be the band leaders. And I remember Skitch Henderson and Doc Severinsen, and of course we all know Paul Schaefer, who does so much Warren Zevon to keep David Letterman entertained, and I appreciate that.
I'm not familiar with that program.
You should be.
I am.
You're right. But was Kevin Eubanks the first band leader on a nighttime show that was African American?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And if you notice, there's a theme there with Al Roker and Kevin Eubanks: follically challenged individuals. I support that.
And I'm supportive of that as well. That's their claim to fame. Exactly. I think that all of these things point out that obviously, as I said before, diversity has been an incredibly important part of what we've tried to do at NBC, NBC Universal, NBC News, and I think we've done a good job. It'll never be perfect, but we've done a good job, and I'm quite proud of the record that we've shown both in news and entertainment.
If my memory is correct, and I'm not a student of broadcast journalism or executives and networks, but I think David Sarnoff was known as being a pretty good fellow in doing things to see that there was diversity and being against discrimination. I don't remember Mr. Paley so well. I think he was thought of as a pretty nice fellow, and I don't know who ABC had. I think at Disney, I don't know who they had, but Mr. Sarnoff was a leader, and he might have been the leader. So your network does have some roots.
We're very proud of the record that we've had, especially with regard to African Americans in prominent roles, in first roles, dating back to the advent of television, and I think that that's a position that we continue to believe very strongly in, and I think you see that every day on the NBC television network.
Now, I know you never heard of that guy Letterman, and he's got his top 10 list, and you mentioned you got a top 5 list. You hadn't quite got to top 10 yet. You've mentioned diversity. What are the other 4 issues on your top 5 list?
Yeah, the strategic priorities that I've laid out for the company are first and foremost great content, whether that's in television, film, local, at our theme parks having great rides, having great content, because this entire conversation that we're having, none of it matters if you don't have great content. Digital and the transformation to digital in this new world that we live in is another priority. International growth is another priority for us, making sure that we move from an analog cost structure to one that anticipates the new digital world and all that the changes that brings along is fourth, and then diversity would be the fifth.
Is there any reason for any of the local folks to be concerned that you'll take the local stations off of broadcast?
Comcast has made a clear commitment. I think it's number 1 on their list of commitments that they've put forward with regard to this merger, that there is a commitment to free over-the-air broadcasting. That commitment should not be underappreciated in this day and age when broadcasting models or the single source ad-supported model is under a lot of stress. And so keeping NBC and Telemundo strong, vibrant, and over the air should give comfort to all of those local affiliates.
Mr. Roberts, I asked you yesterday, and I just want to understand for the issue. The Comcast is the provider in Memphis, Tennessee.
That's correct.
And many of my constituents of my persuasion were upset that MSNBC was taken out of the free tier. Is there a manner where constituents in my district can get MSNBC in the free area now, or will there be one in the future?
Yes to both. When you say free, I think you mean the first level of
Basic.
Expanded basic, and
Yeah, it's nothing.
we're going through the same kind of transition that the whole broadcast industry went through with conversion to digital, as Jeff just said. That's a way to reclaim bandwidth and then have more high definition, faster internet, more on-demand choices. So we're taking certain analog channels and rebroadcasting them in digital. Any customer that wants that service for no additional charge can get the device to convert you to digital. Eventually, down the road, they'll all be digital, and we're just in that transition period, and we need to advertise that better, and we want to work with your office to make that more understood.
Thank you very much, sir. I yield the balance of my time.